Number 800-282-2882. I'm going to get to the phones here in just a second, but before we do, I want to relive, or not relive, I want to remind you of some history. In June of 1980, basically the same period in a campaign where we are now, minus a month or so. In June of 1980, Jimmy Carter led Ronaldus Magnus 39-32. John Anderson, third-party candidate, independent candidate, at 21%. Even into August and into early September, Jimmy Carter was leading Ronaldus Magnus in the polls. Now, what I'm leading up to is that Reagan won that election in a landslide. Jimmy Carter conceded on election night before the polls in California had closed. 1980. The pre-election polls into September did not indicate anything of the sort. In fact, there was not one poll that showed the landslide that happened. Now, a quick question. The Carter presidency was a disaster in June of 1990. It was a disaster in June of 1980. It was a disaster in June of 1979. The Carter presidency was a disaster in June of 1978. The Carter presidency was a disaster for 3 of the 4 years. In truth, the Carter presidency was a disaster from the moment Jimmy was sworn in. It was an utter disaster. And everybody knew it. The misery index was created in order to give life to the devastation. Unemployment was sky high. Interest rates, I confuse interest rates with the inflation rate, but they were both in the teens. Or maybe it was unemployment was in the teens and the inflation was high at 6%, whatever. It was disastrous. Interest rates. People couldn't buy homes. It was an utter disaster. Now, in June of 1990, Carter led Reagan by 7 points. My point to you is, I don't believe any of this rot gut. I don't believe Carter was up by 7 points in June of 1980. I think Carter was destined to lose in a landslide from that entire campaign. I don't think the polls were that wrong. I think people talking to the pollsters were not being that honest, for whatever reason. If there were a disaster, a landslide for Carter reflected in the polls, there would have been a massive cover-up for all the polls to lie about it. So I'm not, and I think we've got a carbon copy going on here. Now, we didn't have nearly as many people comfortably unemployed in 1980 as we do now. We didn't have as many people comfortably in economic distress as we do now. But we arguably are in a worse circumstance today than we were then, because the country was not hanging in the balance like it is today, and like a majority of people think that it is today. It is why I say to you every day, if the election were held today, I think that Romney would win in a landslide. And I mean it. I'm not just whistling Dixie, and I'm not trying to be falsely optimistic or anything of the sort. And by the way, Ronaldus Magnus was outspent by Jimmy Carter in 1980. Carter had the media on his side, just like Obama does. And up until the last couple of days of the 1980 campaign, pollsters had it close. It was a toss-up. In the final days, the polls had it a toss-up. Carter leading even in a couple of polls. October 26, Gallup poll, 1980, 2 weeks before the election. Gallup had it Carter 47, Reagan 39. It ends up a landslide. Well, what the hell happened? People just didn't decide with 2 weeks to go that they wanted to get rid of Carter. They knew it months ahead of this, just as they know it now. But the one thing that's constant today and 1980, and that is the media, and I am here to tell you, they are scared. Off camera, off mic, Unseen, while they're writing whatever they write, they are scared to death. Common sense, which they all have a little of. They all know this country's a disaster. They all know this economy is a disaster. They all know it's not Bush's fault. They all know that Obama hasn't the slightest clue what he's doing. None of that matters to them. Keeping Republicans out of power is all that matters to them. No matter what else happens, that's all that matters. And so the coverage and what's not covered news-wise each and every day is going to be structured in such a way as to reflect, hey, it's the new norm. Nobody cares. It's fine. We wish job situation was a little bit better, and we wish that debt situation was a little bit better. But we're going to have health care for everybody pretty soon. Just to cast this circumstance as just as normal as when the country is robustly healthy. All by design. Because that's what they want it to be.